Human beings are kind of odd, and life can be sort of interesting and fun. I have a new job, and mostly what I do is they fly me all over the place, mostly North America, to talk to hospitals and doctors and drag them kicking and screaming into the 21st century with electronic health records, which is a lot of fun, actually. But normally my business cards, just got a new 1,000 of them 2 weeks ago. Normally they say Michael Fossel, MD, PhD, and a bunch of other letters, and then it says that I'm an executive of a corporation, and a consulting physician, and a professor, and some of that's true too. But I could actually, probably Dave can, but it turns out there was a misprint. And I find out that while I've still got the PhD and some other things, I no longer have an MD, I'm now an MC. Oh, really? I thought that was kind of perfect, nicely timed. So my job tonight is to sort of be an MC. I'm going to tell you a little bit about how we got here, who these people are who are hidden around here are going to talk to you tonight, and where we're going. And I may actually introduce you to yourselves, which is going to be kind of a fun thought. Not the way you think, but I'll show you what I mean. I am a bit older probably than I look, and older than everybody else on the panel tonight except for Noel. Noel's got me beat. But I was not old enough to be around when Barb McClintock, she beat me by about a decade, did the original work describing telomeres. But I was around when Len Hayflick, a friend of ours, was the first person who described how cell aging works. I think of Len as the most courageous curmudgeon I know. I would tell him that too, and he'd probably laugh. But he was courageous because what he did was flew right in the face of everything everybody, quote, knew, unquote. The consensus was that cells were immortal, and that somehow aging occurred between cells, and everybody sort of waved their hands at that point. And Len found out it simply wasn't true, and said so, which is why he's courageous. And what he showed was that cells do age, and moreover, he showed there was a clock. That is, the more they divided, the older they acted. I'm not going to get into the difference between cell senescence and cell aging. It doesn't concern me. But cells age, and the shorter somehow this clock was based on number of times it divided. That was sort of as far as Len got, more or less. Still around, still kicking, still fun, still curmudgeonly, still sends good Christmas cards. About 40 years ago, that was 50 years ago, about 40 years ago, though, another friend of ours, Alexei Yalovnikov. Alexei sends his regards tonight, by the way. He's starting TS65, asked my advice. I said, do it, he is. Alexei is a character. Alexei has grown up his whole life in the Soviet Union. He took one foreign trip to East Germany once. So I brought him to the United States and took him to California. I took him to a US grocery store, high-end grocery store. The look on his face was amazing. It reminds me of how I feel about his ability to be intuitive. I tell Alexei he has a lot of crazy ideas. He does have a lot of crazy ideas. But the advantage Alexei has is some of his crazy ideas are dead on. And he was the very first person, he beat Jim Watson by a year, but unfortunately Alexei published in Russian and no one read Russian. And я не понимаю немного по-русски. I don't speak it really at all. But what he said was that every time cells divide, telomeres have to shorten. And he explained why. And he went a little further and he suggested maybe that's the reason that cells age. Maybe that's the clock that Len had been talking about 10 years back. Did a nice job of it. Last week I was out in LA, and by the way, Alexei's son is out there at UCLA getting a PhD in molecular biology. Good for him. Nice guy. The next thing that happened from the perspective for us tonight was what Cal, back there, who you'll hear from soon, and his associates did now about 20 years back, a little more. They were the first people who found that there was a strict correlation between telomere length, negative correlation actually, telomere length and cell aging. And they went beyond that and showed that it's also a causal relationship. That is, if you shorten telomeres, cells get older. If you lengthen them, you can more or less reverse the process, not only in cells, but in reconstituted tissues. And the reason we're here tonight is we can probably go quite a bit higher on the level than just individual tissues in the lab, too. Somebody asked me once what Cal is like. And I said, I'll tell you what he's like. He's the most careful researcher I know. If you ask Cal what I'm wearing, he'd say it's an aqua-colored shirt and a purple tie on the front. He's not sure what color the tie is behind it or what I'm wearing behind it because he's not seeing that. Very careful guy. I'm sort of careful that way clinically, but he's careful in a lot of things. He really is. I'll tell you how careful I am actually in terms of clinical medicine. Cal asked me once if he had a telomerase activator. Remember this? We're sitting in your desk in Menlo Park. If you had a telomerase activator right in the desk, would I take it? And I said, hell no. You take it for a year or two, and I'll see how you do, and then I'll think about it. So that's actually what happened. Except Noel's the one who took it. Cal brought me back and let me see a lot of the early data on this, and I wrote that first book on reversing human aging, theoretically explaining why telomeres cause aging, which is not really what I would say, and then a whole spate of papers in Journal of American Medical Association about this. What intrigued me, I'm not interested in what causes aging. I'm a much more practical guy. I just want to know where is the single most effective point of intervention in age-related diseases. Much more clear-cut question. And that's really what I was talking about back then. The next thing that happened was sort of interesting, which is Cal and Jaron has sort of moved sideways out of all this to my horror, but the next thing that happened is Jaron had a number of telomerase activators, including the one we're looking at tonight. My one slide would have showed you the set of about 4 astrologicides and their basic steroid structure. But Bill Andrews, bless his heart, where did you end up sitting, Bill? There he is, good. Bill decided he was going to look a lot harder and look for some good telomerase activators. There were sort of a number of criteria that we had talked about. The two major ones, though, are pretty simple: safety and increased efficacy. And Bill will tell you where he's gotten since then. Basically, he had a powerhouse of people involved and not nearly enough money. So if you want to help, talk to Bill. Both Bill and Cal, by the way, are heavy-duty runners, especially Bill, who's an ultra-marathoner. And he'll tell you how his times have gotten better with TI-65. Cal tried to get me running. I ended up with a couple of stress fractures. Thank you, Cal. So my opinion is that exercise is excellent for patients. Not for me, okay? But there was a sort of a hiatus there. Not a lot sort of got done taking it to clinical work for a number of reasons, at any rate. And that's when, in 2004, I put out that textbook talking about exactly how this works and the clinical implications of it. I really do think it's probably the best way to deal with age-related diseases, not replacing a joint, not replacing the arteries. No, let's get right to the heart of all this and fix the problem sort of right where it lives. I think the next thing that really came up was Noel. Noel has already said what he did, but Noel fits in that category of courageous. Noel had moxie. He did something no one else had done. He went out and decided to test the whole thing. In 2007, wasn't it? Spring of 2007, Noel? That was the first time any human being, was it 2007, spring? It was. First time any human being had actively tried to reverse human aging. No ifs, ands, and buts. All claims for the last 4,700 years, even most of the claimants didn't believe what they were saying, but it was snake oil. And this has good reason not to be. And Noel had the guts to do it, you fool. Good for you. Again, better you than me, but yeah, I'm on it too. Good, thanks. He started that whole trial, and that's really the gist of where we are today. Now, since that time, last year, Dave Warnarowski, see, I got it right. I can pronounce Warnarowski. Did I do it twice right? Okay, good. Put out a book called Immortality Edge, and he let me be the mascot for it. He and Greta actually did all the lifting and work on it. But what they talked about was not just what we're talking about now, but other ways, behavioral changes, nutritional changes, and also the impact those things might have on either slowing the loss of telomeres or on telomerase activation, or maybe even increasing telomeres. There's a great paper out in the last couple of weeks here about omega-3s, for example. Steve Maitland just sent that to me from Madrid today. So Dave is sort of in the main line, along with two of our other speakers tonight, Louisa and Florence. Florence, by the way, I noticed has no last name up there, which is kind of nice. It's like Cher. That is, dealing with more than just telomerase activation, but that's still the heart of where we're going on all this. In my mind, then, where we are right now is a couple of things. One is there are a couple of researchers heavily involved in finding better ways to extend telomeres, notably Bill, thank you, and he'll probably bring us up to date on a couple of things tonight. I hope you do. Another one that I've got my eye on, obviously, is Maria Blasco, who also sends her regards tonight. I promised I'd plug her, and she said thank you. So Maria sends her best to us all. She's got some interesting stuff coming along. Those of you who are fascinated by it should take a look at her last couple of papers and see where she goes in the next 5 years. But there are at least two other things going on. One is the measurement of telomeres. And those are represented really by Cal Harley and Maria Blasco, and I'll let them tell you more, Cal at least tell you more about that. Cal represented by Telome Health and Maria by Life Length. We've got some feedback on the microphone. there are two things that are important about this. One is that telomeres are becoming sort of the biomarker du jour. I just wrote a review on this. And they're probably a good biomarker. Instead of cholesterol and HDL, it's another generic, in some ways, biomarker, but it's probably a much better one for a lot of reasons. But the other thing that helps us is it's going to give us a better idea how effective a lot of these telomerase activators are in people by looking at telomeres and see if we really can extend them, as we probably can. And the question is how far, and then what happens clinically. Let me comment on something clinical. To my mind, and it's not quite arbitrary, there's sort of two divisions of diseases in respect to telomeres and aging. There's direct pathology and indirect pathology. The direct pathology are things like immune system, skin, joints, where the cell that actually is showing cell aging is the critical cell in the pathology. For example, in joints, chondrocytes show shorter telomeres, osteoarthritis. I sort of wave my hands, but it's a fairly direct connection. There's not a lot of in-between action. The same is true of a lot of other cell systems. These tend not to be as critical from a clinical perspective as the other set of diseases, which are the indirect set. And those are typified by coronary artery disease and generically atherosclerosis and Alzheimer's. You know, if I look at a typical pathology report, what I see is dead myocardium, but it's not the myocardium's fault. It's the innocent bystander to the endothelial cell aging that occurs in the coronary arteries. The same thing almost certainly is going on with Alzheimer's. It's the activated microglia, which have shorter telomeres, that precede that buildup of tau proteins and beta amyloid in the neurons, which die. The problem is that a lot of this is a ratchet phenomenon. Once you've lost those cells in the myocardium, the neurons, we can't really get them back, even if we can pull back the telomeres. It's a more difficult option. I'm not saying it can't be done, but it's a much more difficult thing to do technically. But the other problem is most of the best measures we can get, as we've looked at telomere lengthening over the past 5 years with Noel's group and the patients we're going to hear about from Florence, are patients who would donate blood, but not unusually, they won't donate their medial forebrain and they won't donate coronary artery samples recurrently. Kind of understandable. So it's very hard to get firm measures of the diseases we really want to look at. We can get blood pressure, we can get cardiovascular stuff, we can get a lot of things. But what we can't get is what we most want to get. We will. That's really where we are with regard to that. But the most promising thing that's going on right now is that all of this is finally coming out in clinical medicine. It's finally people out there engaged in the first trial in human history of reversing aging. And the people who are doing it are sitting in this room and listening to the webinar. Okay? If you wanted to ask me who are the key people involved, it's not us on the panel, it's not the researcher in Madrid. If you want to see the people who are key in this, I'd suggest you look left, look right, and look in the mirror. Because you are the people who are going to take this out and see what works, which is what matters to me. Theory be damned. I want to know if this stuff works. It appears to work. Okay? So Godspeed and good luck. But one other thing, I think we will have panels like this and meetings like this recurrently. I hope all of you personally will be there and continue to see me over the next century. Thank you.